Hello, everybody. This is a video to help you go over some of the practice-free response questions about foreign exchange that we are doing in class. So I'm going to jump to questions 2 and 3 because we all were able to do question 1 and go over it in class together. So this is just what the handout looks like. And then if you scroll down to the second page, you'll see question 2. So this question says, assume that yesterday the exchange rate between the euro and the Singaporean dollar was 1 euro equals 58 Singaporean dollars. I'm just going to call that cents, if that's okay. Assume that today that the euro is trading at 1 euro equals 60.60 Singaporean dollars or 60 cents. So my first recommendation with this question is to just wrap your head around the exchange unit. So let's pretend that you're European and you have 1 euro and you're going to go to Singapore. So on your first trip to Singapore, for every 1 euro you have, you get 58 cents. So imagine you have $100 and you go to Singapore, you now would have 58 Singaporean dollars. Then the next time you go to Singapore, you still have 100 euro, but your 100 euro will give you 60 Singaporean dollars. So basically, before you even get into the question, you have to ask yourself, is the euro getting me more or less in Singapore than it did before? And the answer is that it's getting you more. So 1 euro is giving you more currency in Singapore than it did before. So that must mean that the euro has appreciated. And therefore, if the euro has appreciated, then the Singaporean dollar has therefore depreciated. Okay? So think about it from the Singaporean perspective. So if you were in Singapore and you were going to Europe, 58 cents would buy you 1 euro. Whereas now you're going to Europe and you have to spend 60 of your cents to equal 1 euro. So from a Singaporean perspective, you're having to spend more money to get the same return or the same euro. So I know that for some students, this is difficult at first to understand if it's appreciating or depreciating, but I feel like just walk yourself through what we just talked about. Okay, so if we go to the first part of the question, it said, how will the change in the exchange rate affect each of the following in Singapore in the short run? So we have to understand from the Singaporean perspective that we've had a depreciation of currency. So if that means that everything in Singapore is going to be less expensive to countries that buy from them, and also from a Singaporean perspective, European goods in particular are going to be pricier. So in terms of aggregate demand, you want to associate or think about what's going to happen to net exports because this is a foreign exchange question. So if Singaporean money is less valuable, they're going to be importing less. They're going to be importing less and they're going to be exporting more. Why would they export more? Well, from a European perspective, everything in Singapore is cheaper. So they're going to buy more Singaporean goods. So you remember that net exports is exports minus your imports. So if the export number is higher and the import number is lower, then overall we're going to end up on the plus side over here. So aggregate demand would be increasing, and it would be increasing because of the depreciation of the Singaporean dollar, creating a larger trade surplus or exporting more than you're importing in Singapore. So if you peek at the rubric that you were given in class, you can see a little bit of that explanation at the top. But again, it might be difficult if you weren't sure to really fully appreciate the understanding. Ooh, did you see I said appreciate? It's kind of a pun. You might not be able to understand or fully grasp the reasons why. Okay. So going back to the question, it then says the level of employment. So the level of employment is contingent upon the GDP. So we are going to have the understanding that because they are increasing their aggregate demand, you then could envision the graph in which the aggregate demand would be shifting to the right. And if GDP is higher, then the level of people employed in that country will also increase. Now, the second part of the question I think is also pretty challenging. So the Singaporean dollar, we understand, depreciated from part one. And now we have a proposal of the Singaporean government wants to increase the value of its currency. They want to bring it back to where it was, so they want it to appreciate. Ask yourself this question: how does a currency appreciate? Well, just like anything, to be more valuable, it needs to be more scarce, or it needs to be in a lower supply. So the question says, should the Singaporean central bank buy or sell euros on the foreign exchange market? Again, compare these two currencies to each other. If one currency appreciates, the Singaporean dollar, that's what we want, the other currency should then depreciate because they each get a roll. So to depreciate the euro, I need to have more euros out there floating around on the foreign exchange market. So we're going to sell the euros. So thank you, College Board, for only giving us one thing to do and giving us a 50-50 chance, because there is no explain here. If we hop over to the rubric, you'll see that they're just looking for the selling of the euros. Now, instead of buying or selling euros, what domestic open market operation could they complete? Again, capitalizing on your knowledge of monetary policy and recognizing that open market operation can only mean buy or sell bonds. We also have a 50-50 chance, but we have to explain. So again, I want the Singaporean dollar to become more scarce to make it more valuable. And the only graph that we can show an open market operation is the money market graph. So you got your nominal interest rates, you got your quantity of money, demand for money. If I want the Singaporean dollar to become more scarce, I want the money supply in that country to be smaller. So to shift that to the left, we would sell bonds, because a smaller money supply means to sell bonds. And that is how you get the answer for the Singaporean dollar. You also could look at the last part of this rubric, and you could argue that by selling bonds, it's going to increase the interest rates in Singapore. And because of that, if you think about the foreign exchange market, that will mean more people will demand Singaporean dollars because they want to dump their financial investments in Singaporean banks. So that's another way that you could explain why selling bonds is the appropriate response. But either way, you're going to get the point for that. All right, there you go.